I'm very happy to know that there is such a forum in JNU. It's quite a remarkable thing to have a forum on Adivasi discourse, but you can just say forum on Adivasi in JNU, and that also outside the hallowed buildings that are there in the academic block. I think it is also time to get out of those big buildings there in the academic block and at least come till here. Then eventually I think we will also hopefully make the next step outside the campus. So, which is very much needed. As I walked into this venue here, I ran into Vani, and she just told me that she did a field work in Bijapur, and it was so good to hear that. I also studied in this supposedly very prestigious institution called JNU, and it was very rare to meet anyone who would do a field work on Bijapur and go there. There would be people who used to go to Adivasi areas, but those were not really, that was not the zeitgeist of JNU, that is not really JNU. Being JNU meant something else. So it's good that things have changed, and Adivasi is here. I did not have the honor to meet Abhay Khaka, and I am getting to know about him. So I want to pay homage to him and his work as I get to know about him. I am reminded, I think this was around, when was he writing this?
This was in
18, okay. Around maybe slightly before that, I remember this term called Jal Jangal Zameen, which came into wide usage. And I just want to pick one thing which Madam was saying earlier, Vani Khaka was saying, which is Jal Jangal Zameen, and this other word which came called Dharti. And I feel that you, by saying this, you have completed a thought process which was inside me for a long time, and I didn't know how to articulate it, because the Jal Jangal Zameen is used in a supposedly pro-Adivasi way, and it is, Jal Jangal Zameen is used as a way to counter, say, big mining interests that are displacing Adivasis. It is used as a pro-Adivasi, favoring the rights of Adivasis. And yet, I was always thinking that there is something amiss here in this Jal Jangal Zameen. And it definitely came into discourse again, talking about discourses. There are other discourses also, which may be around the time of the Narmada Bachao Andolan. I think this Jal Jangal Zameen was used extensively by social movements that are also often called new social movements. But I think Jal Jangal Zameen seems to also fragment what it means to be Adivasi, So it was used more like that Adivasis have been deprived of, say, the means of livelihood, for example, right? So we need to give them rights, we need to empower them, that kind of thinking, which is very much a part of the, the neoliberal, or whatever you want to call it, post-neoliberal state, which out of a kind of guilt, has to give rights to Adivasis, then say that, okay, so we need to save your Jal Jangal Zameen. But when you say Dharti, Dharti, when you say it is like, I think it's very difficult to incorporate Dharti in your policy documents, for example. You know, that it cuts very deep. There is something which is kind of impenetrable there when you say it is about the Dharti. Recently, I was in Chhattisgarh in Gidam, and they have an annual celebration. They are called the Bhumkal celebration. So Bhumkal, now if you were to understand Bhumkal, I think the term Bhumkal has many meanings. If you were to understand Bhumkal, Kal as in say time, Bhum as in the, if you were to think of it as the Dharti, the earth. If you think of Bhumkal celebration, then it is the time of the earth. You see, it is not the time of the Adivasi. You would imagine that the Adivasi would celebrate their own time, the time of the Adivasi. No, the time of the Adivasi never comes. Because they are not just people who are on the forest, who are by the river, you know. They are not just people like that, like human beings, you know, right? They are the Dharti itself. You can't separate the two. So, when you say it's the time of the earth, so when the Adivasi is in rebellion, and that's what the Bhumkal celebration is about, that the Adivasi warrior, Gundadhur, he leads this, which is not just an uprising, by the way. Remember the work by Ranajit Guha called Elementary Aspects of Peasant Insurgency in Colonial India. Ranajit Guha's Elementary Aspects of Peasant Insurgency in Colonial India is like the seminal book of post-colonialism, the seminal book of subaltern studies. My earlier speaker referred to Sumit Sarkar. Sumit Sarkar had some issues with subaltern studies. He was with subaltern studies, but later he came out of it, right? Because too much of post-structuralism, too much of Gayatri Spivak happening in that. But if you look at the grounds on which Sumit Sarkar would come out, this definitely was not a ground. As in, if you're talking about the elementary aspects of peasant insurgency, which was basically about tribal revolts, which was called revolts. So what the tribals did was either just rebellion, a revolt, or you can only talk about it methodologically only in terms of elementary aspects. So I was wondering, as I was sitting here listening to you, I was wondering, why only elementary aspects? You know elementary, what the word means, right? Elementary. Like molecular structure or something in chemistry or something. Elementary, rudimentary. I was thinking, why not advanced aspects of peasant insurgency? I mean, you use just the term peasant insurgency, it's mostly about tribal revolts. Otherwise, an exciting, great work, right? Why not advanced? Why not conceptual? Conceptual aspects. Why only elementary? Why, when you talk about tribal, in fact, we also suffer from a poverty of language. The moment I say tribal, the default word which Google search will suggest, and my pathetic brain is also suggesting, is tribal के साथ revolt ही आ रहा है, tribal के साथ rebellion ही आ रहा है. Both rebellion and revolt is like a reactive kind of a thing. It does not positively suggest a world of its own. So I think what has happened in, say, a work like Elementary Aspects is that the tribal, what the tribal does, the agency of the tribal, is only regarded as that kind of a, I'm sorry to say this, but elementary also, like when you talk about an ant colony, for example, an ant colony, insects, there it's like that kind of elementary kind of thing. When you read Heidegger, you will see Heidegger will often refer to, like how insect colonies, and from there he will slowly come to what he calls life forms, right? So what has happened with the Adivasi is precisely this. that you have to talk about the Adivasi, what the Adivasi did in the 17th century, 18th century, 19th century, only as some kind of context to what the freedom movement is going to happen in the after Gandhi comes, right? It's like you know, others are chopping the vegetables and all that, and finally the great chef will come, right? Some Sanjeev Kapoor or someone, those great chef will come, right? So what the Adivasis, and this is like counter elite history. This is supposed to be counter elite history. Ranjit Guha's elementary aspects was supposed to be challenging the norm, challenging dominant conceptions of historiography. So it is as though it's only preparatory to the eventual freedom movement and the great Nehrus and the great Gandhis is going to come. And even I would be critical from this aspect of even Bhagat Singh, you know, from this aspect. So when you then go into the Zal Zangal Zameen, and I remember when I have written on some of these issues, and when in my brain it comes, okay, now I'm writing an article, and then Zal Zangal Zameen has to be used. Because it's like a default kind of thing, it's easy to communicate what you mean, and it is not in itself a problematic term, because it is true that we need to defend the Zal Zangal Zameen, you know, in Jharkhand, in Chhattisgarh, in all these places, right? But you see that it is attached to a particular kind of a discourse, which takes you in a very different direction. So you say, okay, how about Dharti? How about Bhoom Kal? That's where the Bhoom Kal is the time of the earth, is something which Adivasis are themselves celebrating. So when you say Bhoom Kal, the time of the earth, it is both elementary as well as advanced at the same time. It is both elementary as well as highly philosophical and conceptual at the same time. It's about a particular conception of time, right? Now, that kind of a way to understand the Adivasi situation, these institutions, JNU, DU, I think they have nothing to offer, you know. And when you go there directly, and it's not just about going there again, you know. We need to do a lot of under-laboring to be able to even have this language to understand this. So that's where I want to salute someone like Abhay Khaka, who seem to have been moving in that direction, you know. And this is a task which I think as researchers, as people living off whatever taxpayers' money, the right wing is attacking JNU, that, you know, these people taking to all the taxpayers' money, and they are just too old to study.
Jahangir National University.
Yeah, Jahangir National University. I appeal to Jahangir National University that this is a task. I don't care whether it's the right wing saying, but it is true that JNU gets a disproportionately large portion of the funds. And what is doing? We need to ask these questions. Don't leave it only to the right wing to ask these questions. Why aren't you asking? And a question like that emerges out of Abhay Khaka's work also. The other thing I want to tell you is, in Chhattisgarh, my recent visits there is a tremendous kind of resurgence of social movements going on there. I do not know social movements is the right word. Again, as I told you, you know, we don't have the language. You know, we need to under labor to even have the language. But there are movements. I'm talking specifically about Bastar. There is a little village called Silgair. It's a little village, but it's not even a village as you would imagine it. It's just a patch in the forest. And when you go there, you think you have read somewhere that Silgair is a village, and then you wonder where is the village. And that is one thing which you will be surprised when you go there, that actually The village is not even like a cluster which you would imagine. You know, it is just a part of the forest. You know, so in Silgir there is a movement against building of security force camps there. Can you imagine? Place where there is just forest, there is no electricity, you know, there are no roads even. Suddenly there is this really high-tech security force camp armed with all kinds of Israeli drones, you know, most high-tech AI-powered drones are suddenly there, and there's a CRPF camp, there's a BSF camp in the middle of nowhere, you know. And then there is a huge road, like your Delhi Meerut Expressway. You would imagine that the local Adivasis don't even have a bike. Just about maybe some of them have a bicycle. And you would wonder, why are there huge metalled roads? Is there a Delhi Meerut Expressway, Yamuna Expressway to Agra, in the middle of the Bastar forests, the Dandakaranya forests, where eventually, by the way, the earlier government, the Congress government of Baghel, was having this Ram Path or something, because of course, mythology.
Ram Path Gaman.
Ram Path Gaman, you not just have to go, I mean, it's because the Dandakaranya forests are there. So in the Ramayana, you have stories referring to Dandakaranya forest. So you have the Ram Path Gaman, right? And then you have this. So you have these huge roads, and it is all about a kind of militarization in Bastar to make sure that the iron ore mines, and not just iron ore, but also rare earth metals, you know, like cobalt, the kind of rare earth metals that are there in your cell phones. So the digital kind of revolution, as you know, is not possible without those rare earth metals, those kind of like cobalt, right, or lithium for electric vehicle batteries. And those kind of rare earth metals are there, and they are secretly mining that. So to make sure that happens, what you see is that there you have this kind of tremendous militarization, corporatization. The same, even the opposition parties, they might be opposing Adani at the national level. But in Chhattisgarh, there is Adani's investment. When the Congress was in power, how will you explain that? Tell me. Give me an explanation. How is that possible? Right? But because I think one of the reasons why it is possible is because it's an Adivasi area. You know, you can do anything there. Even opposition parties, they don't care when it comes to what's going on there. So there are aerial bombings going on. Recently I told someone that, you know, there are some aerial bombings in Bastar area. And they said, no, like how can that be? It's no, it happened in Mizoram in the 60s under Indira Gandhi.
Gaza.
Of course, Gaza, right? So there is and a lot of the drones that are used for these aerial bombings are of course Israeli manufactured. So all this is happening today in front of us. So I have written a little bit on this, on particularly the Silgir movement, and then there are other movements that are going on in order to make sure that these huge metal roads and the huge camps of security forces that are leading to rampant militarization does not happen. And as you know, Chhattisgarh has a chief minister from Adivasi background, and even a taxi driver you talk to will tell you what is going on there. You know, so I think there are resistance going on in all these places. Adivasis, I think they are really, they are not just resisting, but the resistance is happening in really innovative and creative ways. But I think speaking out of a place like this university, I think the question is really to ourselves, that what are we doing with all these academic frameworks that are there? It's not just about your personal commitment. I don't want you to go home feeling guilty, oh, I have not done something. No, I think it's an entire systemic thing. Even your post-colonial studies. In fact, when I wrote the essay after coming back, to Delhi on Silgir, what I saw in the Silgir movement, invariably my brain moved towards referring something from Fanon, referring something from Cabral. So, but even with Fanon, and this is something I think in future the forum on Adivasi discourse can take it up. Even the way you read Fanon, like the kind of appropriation of Fanon, the kind of co-option of Fanon by post-colonial studies has been such that we have forgotten, how to even read Fanon in the light of what is happening with the Adivasis here. So I had mentioned there, and this is the last point, is that when you're talking about Adivasi culture, for example, the thing that the movements in Bastar are today posing, conceptually we can say, the conceptual problem for us and how we grasp it conceptually, is that how can the question of culture be the question of existence itself? So it's not just about getting Adivasis and doing a millet festival here. It is not just about getting a few token Adivasis and doing this, that or the other, or even like doing some work on Jal Jangal Zameen, or even Hasdeo Bachana Hai, Hasdeo Forest. It's not just about that. But in Bastar, in Chhattisgarh, in places like Jharkhand, the question of saving the culture of Adivasis, it's a question of their very existence. Astitva ka ladai hai. Because it's their habitat. So when we say Mool Vasi, the Mool goes to the Dharti. You see? The Mool goes to the Dharti. So it's about their land and their habitat and their forest. So it's quite possible that Adivasis can become the working class and come to places like Delhi and become migrant laborers in Delhi, right? And then try to save their culture. No, it's not just that, because these are people whose culture is connected to their land and to their forest and their habitat. And I think there is nothing about this is not about romanticizing them, right? It's not even like preserving them in that way of life. No, it is just a way of life. It is not that an Adivasi cannot be something else, that an Adivasi cannot be cannot be a AI scientist or something, or a NASA chief. No, it's not about that. It's just that there is a form of life there, and if they want to be like that, then they should be allowed. You can't impose this kind of militarization and corporatization, which is what is going on in large parts of Adivasi areas. There is much more to say, but I think we are running short of time. Thank you very much.